Mary Beth Stephen posted this the other day in the Facebook group, and she has these little cards that you can get from her that have like suffixing conventions and some other pieces. And this was one of them, not this exact one because I couldn't find that one. And so I had to like build my own. It's kind of similar. Scholars are people who notice things. And so I believe that kiddos of any age can be a scholar. And sometimes the littlest of learners, when you tell them that they are scholars, they take that work very seriously. And when we invite them into these spaces as scholars, as investigators, as detectives, we are pushing, we're giving them the learning, we're allowing them to do some of that digging. And I think that's super important. And so she had an image of like a butterfly wing, but I found this image on Canva and I loved it because it's like a zoomed in version of a butterfly wing. And you can see the scales that make up the wing. And so before I even get into word inquiry, if that's something that, you know, you're just introducing this year with your students, I might put up an image like this and say, what is it that you notice? What do you notice about this picture? And what do you think it might be? Maybe. And then we can use that level of curiosity or that ability to notice things to then dig into and talk about words. And what do we notice inside of those words? And what are the patterns that we're seeing that are developing? How can we be scholarly in our work with English spelling? And to me, that's what this work is inviting us to do. Now, if you're part of any of the structured word inquiry Facebook groups, you'll have seen this kind of circulating around. I don't want to watch this whole video with you today because it's going to take too long. But if you have about 20 minutes of time and you want to dig into this, I highly recommend this. It's a collaborative project between Peter Bowers, who was kind of the grandfather, the designer of structured word inquiry, which the structure and the formula that Lan and I kind of promote in this work from Mary Beth Stephen is a riff off of that same sort of thing that Peter came up with. And Marie Folley, who's done a bunch of work around creating visuals to help explain morphology or English orthography concepts. So how can we add a visual element to help those learners really solidify the pieces that we're trying to explain to them? So this was a collaborative project between the two of them. And it talks about how English spelling works and how letters of the alphabet form graphemes, and those graphemes come together to make up morphemes. And when we say the morphemes in all the parts of the words, then we're hearing phonemes, and it really digs into it. And so if you're ever wondering about kind of all of the background pieces and how all this stuff comes together, this video is a great little intro nugget. If you know any baby teachers in your life who are like in the infancy of their schooling, this would be a fantastic video to share with them in any subject, right? Because we're going to talk a little bit today about how this extends beyond English, the class, not the language, and just how important it would be to have this background knowledge as you're walking into any classroom.
Charlie, quick question for you. And I wonder if it might be of some value to, in the video, they're talking about the word healthy. And so how those phonemes and graphemes and everything build into that. And the sound of the Y on the end, the phoneme they've got as an I.
Do you have a hot seat word for me today?
I do. Okay, now you're just going to love this. And it's really about the story that brought about this word that I want to celebrate because it was so much fun. My nephew was sitting at the supper table, and so my sister and her husband, they were doing a spelling challenge with the three boys. And so they were going back and forth with all these spelling words, and the kids were just rattling them off. And so they're in grade 8, 6, and 4. And so they were doing really well. So Derek, he got onto the computer and he typed in really hard words to spell. And so I'm going to say the word to you, and then I'll give you a sentence with it in. And then I want you, number one, to see if you can even spell it. And then let's rip it apart because it's so much fun. And when you look at the connections of what the history of this word is and what other words are attached to it, it is pretty cool. Okay.
Awesome.
Ready? So
Yes.
your word is acquiesce. Okay. So Burke seemed to acquiesce the decision of quitting hockey.
Mm.
Acquiesce.
Okay. Did I get it right?
So, okay, before I even tell you, this is what they did. They phoned me and said, Auntie, can you spell acquiesce? And then gave me a sentence and then said acquiesce. So, Charlie, you're not right now.
Okay.
But you do
That's
have
okay, because like that's not a word I use in my daily vernacular. Thanks, Lan.
Oh, I just love it. Okay, so ACQU.
Oh, ACQU.
Yeah, so acquiesce, so IESCE.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Acquiesce. And so meaning
Okay.
kind of you're okay with, or you're at peace with the decision, or you're okay with it or whatever. So you're
Okay.
satisfied with it. You're at rest with it. It's okay.
Oh,
Now, when you it's interesting because when you go into the actual history of it and just to find out who would be coming to our party with
yeah. I'm intrigued. I have no idea who would be invited to the family reunion.
yeah, so it's kind of fun.
And I wonder, like off the top of my head, if AC is a prefix, like an assimilated prefix, because sometimes that happens. Yeah, I got nothing. Like maybe it's a base word, but I doubt it. I feel like there's more to it. All right. So the whole point of this portion of our little sideshow here is to model what some word study might look like. Oh, yes, acquiescence. See, that's the one I thought of. Okay, so here we see it. To agree, tactily, to concur. Okay, so first attested in the 1610s, it's oddly specific, remain at rest, which is now obsolete. In the 1650s, it evolved to mean agree, tactily, or concur, from French, to yield or agree to be at rest. From Latin, to become quiet, blah, blah, blah. So it does have an assimilated prefix. That's the AD. And then from rest, genitive. Oh, it's related to quiet, maybe. Okay, so now I'm going to go into my Latin dictionary to see what I might learn about this particular word. Quiet, calm, rest. Now, this is a noun, so it doesn't follow the same verb. What's the word? I'm going to look at structure plan that we use when we come across a verb that has the 4 different forms, and we look at form 2 and form 4 as the givers of the English spelling. But I see the word quiet in here. So I'm guessing that the word quiet is part of this family. We could be seeing so see this QUIES, which kind of makes up part of this spelling here. So this could be an example of assimilated bases where we have more than one base coming from a Latin verb. So here is where I would look. So this is the verb. So I would look here at the fourth one where I take off the US, and that leaves me with QUIET. Then over here, I take off the ERE, and that leaves me with QUIESC. Now, I'm not sure in English spelling we ever have a word that would end in that SC unless it's a clip. So like the word disc, DISC, is a clip from a bigger word, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to say that this base would be QUIESCE. So my word sum for this would be AC plus QUIESCE is rewritten as the word that we know. So acquiescence is the one I was thinking about. And it's obviously related. But if I go here and I look up, so remember on the desktop version of the etymology dictionary, you can look up the Latin words, and that's going to give you a list. If you do it on the app, it doesn't work. Oh, I've never even heard of that word before. That's kind of fun. Requiem. What? Okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. RE plus. So then this QUIEM would be another base coming from this Latin word. So there's actually 3 so far that we've discovered. Quieten, to become quiet. I've never heard of, well, maybe it fell out of favor in 1890. I'm not sure. Coy. Huh. That's cool. So coy could come to the family reunion. It's not going to sit on the same picnic blanket as the word quiet, but it would be invited. It would get an invitation to this, the Latin verb that it has connection to. Now, this is where, so we got to be careful, right? Just because I see the word quiet here doesn't mean it's actually connected, because this has got a different verb. So this placate, you do not get an invitation. But some of the other words would come. That is such a cool word.
Yeah. I just thought, like, when you start to dive in, right, when you look at the meaning of the word, right, to be kind of at rest with it, okay with it, you're agreeing with it, and just
Like
kind of
you're
at rest or at
peace.
calm. Yeah, at peace with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
That is so cool.
And to have your nephew calling you saying, Auntie, spell it, and here's the sentence, and I got it right, and maybe you will too, but let's see how you do. And I did not get it right.
Feels a little bit like a setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a cool word. And this other word that I picked for today across the subject areas kind of led me down a super fun rabbit hole too. So my son is doing coding at school. So originally I was thinking like coding could be a fun word to explore. Not a super huge family. It wasn't as exciting. And then I was thinking, well, coding is part of computational thinking in the curriculum. So like, let's see where does this land us if we look up like computational or the word computer. It's like, okay, so let's see where this takes us, because sometimes when we see certain parts, we automatically assume, oh, that's a prefix or that's a suffix. And then later on you discover like, oh, actually, no, that's just part of that spelling. So whenever I see one and I'm like super confident, I always hesitate a little bit because maybe it isn't a prefix or it isn't a suffix in this particular word. So I started doing some thinking because the first question when we're looking at hypothesizing a word sum, which is the work that we're trying to promote here as a way to look at words, is how do I think the word is built? So I first initially thought COMPUTE, so compute, plus ER is rewritten as COMPUT, replace the ER. So that was my initial sort of thought. But then I was looking at compute and I was like, wait a second, what if COM is actually a prefix in this word, which would lead me to have a word sum with COM plus PUTE plus ER is rewritten as COM PUT, replace the ER, computer. So then I had to do some brainstorming. And so I asked myself, can I think of any words that has PUTE as a base? And to be fair, like this was the weekend, first of all. Second, the second cup of coffee hadn't kicked in yet. And honestly, all I could come up with were words related to computer. So all the words I could brainstorm in my head had COM attached to it. Now, that's not to say that the COM here couldn't be a prefix, but oftentimes when the pattern that we see is that it's showing up like kind of connected together, we don't worry necessarily about pulling it apart as a prefix when we're working with kiddos. So like we would just introduce COMPUTE as the base because there's no other situations where PUTE is being used as a base element. Okay, so that's kind of where I landed. From here, I went to do some investigating. So when I went to my favorite, there's more than one. There's one online etymology dictionary that I'm aware of, although I do use the Oxford English Dictionary from time to time. Okay, so if I look up the word computer, it tells me here it comes from the 1640s, one who calculates, like this all makes sense to me. Agent noun from compute. So remember, I think it's grade 2 or 3, agent nouns come into play using ER as a suffix to indicate a doer, right? So the verb is compute. A computer is one who computes. A baker is one who bakes. A maker is one who makes, okay? Or one that, like a thing that, okay? So then I come over here and I see the word compute as a verb. So I was like, yep, that's where I was going. We have COM meaning with or together. And then we have putare, to reckon, originally to prune. I'm still not certain how we go from pruning to reckoning. But there was obviously a connection there somewhere. And then this is where I was like, what is happening here? A doublet of count. Okay, so let's first look at putere as a source, as the Latin verb that's going to give me some words. So then I took putere and I put it in the Etym search and I looked to see where else it was coming up. So compute, computation, totally got that because they're related to computer. I was like, I'm winning. Then it was like impute, interesting. This is where I was like, oh snap, amputate. So it's a clip from ambi meaning around, but putere to prune or trim, which literally is what you're doing when you amputate. So not appropriate, but also kind of funny. Okay, so amputate, amputation. So right away now, I know that when I build up my word family, PUTE is the base element. And now I've got AM and COM, well, and IM really up there as prefixes that I could have as words that are in my family. Okay, so I get through the amputation, and then I have repute, like ill repute. And so I was like, okay, that makes sense to me. We have more. Berate, interesting. But here we've got a switch. So it's going to come to the family reunion, but it's not going to live in this. It's not on the blanket of the PUTE base element because it's got different letters, right? Because it has to connect with structure and meaning in order to live inside the matrix. So that's not going to work. Again, mind blown. Reputation. So again, we go from this old thing meaning to clean, trim, or prune, but there was a shift in that meaning where it was like to judge, to believe, which if you think about pruning something, you're cleaning it up. And if you're judging something, you're seeking out like the truth, like the elements of the purest form of the story. So I can see a little bit of a connection here. But now we have RE as a prefix. Here, they're suggesting it might mean repeatedly. And then this idea of judging or supposing or believing. And then again, deputy. So this was so fun. And in case you're wondering, like I make these faces while I'm doing this work in my office by myself, where I'm like, and then dig a little deeper because I would have never, yes, I love this, Christiana. If you're pruning, you're also judging what has to go. See, the collective mind comes together with how these pieces work. But when I looked at the word computer, I would have never connected the word deputy to it. So if you've got a group of students who would prefer a challenge as opposed to like a cleanup, like an actual word inquiry, let's figure out the word computer, how's it built, let's dig in. Maybe you pose a question. So-and-so told me that the word deputy is related to the word computer. Are they correct? How do you know? And send them off. And maybe they need to do a little digging and find out, are they connected? How are they connected? I just think it's so cool how many words would be sitting on the Putare blanket, the PUTE blanket at the Putare family reunion, that initially I didn't think were words that would be showing up at all. Like reputation and computer. The other thing that's kind of interesting about this word family, and we talk about this a little bit in some of the other families that we look at, is how there's a shift in some of those pronunciations because of the stress timing. So remember, English is a stress timed language. We don't spell the stress that we hear. And so it's not as noticeable as like the SIGN, the sign family, where we have sign, design, insignia, signature, right? We notice a huge shifting there around syllables and the stress timing of those words. But I think this allows you to see how sometimes there's a little bit of a shift in the spelling, because when we add a prefix or we add the suffix, we're maybe creating different syllables that we didn't have when we built it out another way. The other thing I really like about this word family is you could really challenge your students when they're building out words to be able to explain or justify if that's a real word. So amputee is a real word, but is a computee a word? Or, you know, now we have the word deputy, but it's spelled different with the Y. Although it was funny, I'm pretty sure when I looked it up in the Oxford English Dictionary, there was an old spelling of deputy at one point where it had the double E's, and then it shifted to the Y at the end. I chose to put all of the definitions, the kind of working definitions in this one family. If this is too much for your students, you could just do the PUT, meaning to count. And but I think with older students, you could explain all of this to them. I will also say that if I was going to work with a smaller aged students, I could just look at the word computer and build out a word family for the word computer. There is nothing, or compute. There's nothing wrong with looking at a word that we know has more morphemes in it, but looking at it as a free base word when we know it's actually a bound base word. There's nothing wrong with that. The key is that once we can handle more and we know more, that we then bring in this idea that, PUTE is actually the base, COM is a prefix, and would you believe all of these other words are part of that family or that matrix. So this is where, as educators, we get to decide where our students at. If we're at computer and compute and computing and computes, then that's fine. That's where it can stay. And when we learn more, then we come back and revisit. How on earth do we get from computer to count? Like, what happened there? And this is where sometimes Doug offers us up a really nice visual flow chart, because there's a lot going on in the mixing bowl of language. So we have COM plus PUTARE from the Latin, okay, computere. Now, you will see here that it got here in French, and then somehow we then went from Old French CONTER to COUNT, count. Now, I have no idea why that happened, right? There's just some pieces where at this point are unexplainable. However, this little clip here from the OED shows us that, now, this is where you have to preview the things you share with the humans. Okay, friends? If CUNTER is going to end up with a phone call to you at some point, just black that part out. Okay? So we have Old French to Spanish to Portuguese to Italian. So it's showing like the lineage. Now, this is where I had like this duh moment. Modern French, the verb to count is COMPTER. And I knew that, but I hadn't put it together that in French, to count is very closely connected to its Latin root. But in English, we did a little jump. And so we have COUNT. So what this tells us is COUNT can come to the COMPUTARE family reunion, but they're going to sit on their own blanket. So they're related. We can see the lineage, of the great grandparent thing. But because they don't share that structure, they have to be on their own, in their own matrix. Again, am I going to get into this with the teeny tiny humans? Probably not. We're just going to look at count, counter, counting, counts, recount, discount. Ooh. If DIS and discount, what does that mean? Does it mean not? What meaning might it have? Right? Is it not counted? I don't know. That just came to me. So anyways, you can see here where you can go in many, many different directions. COMPT was a variant in English from the 15th to the 18th century. So we really didn't have it figured out for quite a while. When I see this COMPT as a variant in English, it's possible that our pronunciation of it evolved, and then eventually the spelling got adjusted to match how we were saying it, anglicizing that French word. But kind of cool. The computer is connected to count, even though they don't share a structure. The other thing I wanted to share with you in our last few minutes today is an example that was, again, shared in those Facebook groups. And this was shared by Lisa Barnett in the Structured Word Inquiry Facebook group. And I know some of you were in there. I loved this. This was like, because people often ask, like, well, what does this look like? What could this look like? How old do they have to be to do this? Well, she talks about how one of her students was investigating the digraph EA and was wondering if EA is always a digraph. Like, are there times when the E and the A are together, but they're not a digraph? And so she had her working groups dive in and do a collaborative effort on a bulletin board. And these are kids in grade 4 or 5, special education, small groups, reading levels somewhere between grade 1 and grade 5. So if you're wondering who can do this, the answer is anyone, as long as the teacher has done some scaffolding and supports and steps along the way to help them build understanding and be successful. So she posted these pictures. They must refer to themselves as the spelling wizards, I imagine. And after they've done this digging, then I would concur with that definition. So their hypothesis was, we've heard the saying, when two vowels go walking, the first one does the talking. In words like seat, ice cream, and dream, we hear one vowel sound with 2 letters. So they're thinking that when the E and the A are hanging out together, they are a digraph. 2 letters that are coming together to make one phone or phoneme. So a couple of pieces that she zoomed in on for this bulletin board post, but they noticed that EA can represent at least 3 different phonemes. And so it's not always a long E sound that we hear. We might hear a short right? Read, read. Yeah. They have please, pleasant, pleasure. So again, the EA stays the same, but there's a shift in the sound as the word family is built out. Deal and dealt, clean and cleanser, breathe and breath, 2 different lead and lead. Okay, so they figured out that EA can represent different phonemes, which, by the way, is a feature of English spelling. That's important. If all we had was one way to represent the sound, English spelling would be a hot mess. So then they broke up the word digraph, di meaning 2, graph meaning written or recorded. Then they said, well, when isn't it? And it's not a digraph if the E and the A are in different morphemes. So if the E is part of a prefix and the A is part of a base or base element, then the EA in that sense is not a digraph. Now, this is one of those tricky ones because the E is making a long E sound and the A is making its A sound. But, you know, having this conversation with students for them to realize that it has to be within the same morpheme in order for it to count as a digraph. Now, this crew went like deep because they have some bound base words in here, like real and create and nuclear, and mileage is a good one because that one's not so bad. MILEAGE, right? But some of these you are not going to explore with teeny tiny people. But with older students, why not? So I thought it was really interesting that they showcased this work, that they put it out there, but more importantly, that they got to a place in their conclusion to say, you know what? EA isn't always a digraph. Sometimes EA is just an E and an A that end up together in the word.